The movie begins with a married couple, Sophie and James, who seem happy with each other. Currently, they are moving an old couch into their New York apartment. Sophie wants to renovate and use the couch, but James is not keen on the idea. It turns out that even though her husband comes from a wealthy family, Sophie prefers to live a simple lifestyle. After moving the couch, the couple begins to goof around in their room. However, their playful moment is cut short when James receives a phone call. He is devastated to learn that his father has passed away. He also finds out that, as the only son, he has inherited his father's entire business and property. In the following scene, we see the couple relocate to a suburban mansion away from the city. Sophie isn't happy with the changes, but she is willing to adapt to support her husband. The next morning, James gets ready for his first day as CEO of his father's company. Sophie asks him to spend the day with her, but he refuses since he doesn't want to make a bad impression on his first day. Afterwards, Sophie, who is unemployed, starts wandering around the big mansion and feels bored. There are many servants in the house, so she doesn't need to work or worry about anything. Later, a housekeeper approaches her in the room and asks if she needs anything. Sophie finds it uncomfortable to boss around and requests that she take the day off. She explains that, unlike James, she is from a humble family and prefers to do things on her own. That evening, when James returns home, Sophie informs him that she has fired all the housekeepers. He becomes upset because they have been with the family for a long time, and it was their only source of income. However, she mentions that she has paid them 2 years' salary and encouraged them to pursue their dreams. James is still worried about managing such a large mansion, but she promises to handle everything. The next morning at work, we see James struggling with his new role as CEO. He tries to introduce new ideas during a meeting, but his co-workers don't seem to agree with him. Just then, he receives a call from Sophie, who says she can't start the lawnmower. James promises to come in the evening and help her before hanging up. When he returns home, he attempts to start the lawnmower, but struggles since he has never done this before. He is frustrated that he now has to pick up the slack after his wife fired the housekeepers. The next morning, Sophie claims that they were happier at the apartment, which annoys James a lot. She mentions that she is not used to living in such a large mansion and is uncomfortable having servants because she dislikes ordering people around. In the afternoon, James confides in his assistant about this difficult situation. The latter reassures him by claiming that money can solve all problems. He then informs James about a company that sells robot housekeepers. In the next scene, the couple arrives at a tech company and meets the CEO Julian. He shows them several robots that look just like humans. James asks his wife to choose one of them, and Julian suggests a female robot named Jessica. However, Sophie worries that having such a beautiful woman in their home might make her feel insecure, so she decides to hire a male robot instead. Julian then introduces them to a male robot named Henry. To prove his obedience, Julian commands him to lick James' shoes, which Henry does without hesitation. Following this, they bring Henry to the mansion, and Julian sets up a docking station where he can be charged. The robot then starts working around the house and proves to be very efficient, but Sophie still perceives him as a human and feels uncomfortable giving him orders. In the following days, Henry becomes adept at handling household chores. One afternoon, he accidentally enters Sophie's bedroom as she is starting to undress. This makes her feel very uncomfortable and anxious. Later, she tells her husband about how Henry was staring at her body, but he dismisses her concerns, stating that he's just a robot and it doesn't matter. After that, James takes Henry to play racquetball. Throughout the game, the robot continues to defeat him, but James does not mind at all. He instead enjoys the company and has a great time. He also opens up about his grief over his father's death. Upon hearing this, Henry expresses his condolences, showcasing his human-like personality. The next day, when Sophie gets to know that her husband's co-workers are visiting the house, she gets to cleaning. Henry helps her with the chores and even cracks a few jokes to alleviate her stress. This finally wins her trust, and she gives him a Charles Dickens novel as a gift. Later, as they take a short break, Sophie offers him wine, and he starts drinking without any hesitation. She wonders what happens to it, and Henry explains that when he's at his docking station, everything resets automatically. When James' coworkers visit the house, they are impressed by how much the robot looks like a human. Henry even quotes Charles Dickens, which further amazes them. Sophie then tells the guests that she sometimes forgets he is a robot, but James doesn't seem pleased by this comment. One night, Sophie is awakened from her sleep by some unusual noises outside her home. She goes to check and finds Henry lying naked on the ground. She wakes him up, but the robot has no memory of how he got there. He simply claims that he Henry saw a dream where he was a human. As they head back to the house, Julian shows up and is outraged to find them together. However, Sophie explains that she simply found Henry lying there. The following day, the couple summons Julian and tells him what happened last night. He immediately checks the robot and concludes that it's just a minor glitch. Sophie mentions that Henry was dreaming, but Julian says it's impossible. He then warns the couple to be careful and prevent Henry from developing emotions, as it might cause him to behave more like a human. After Julian leaves, James starts blaming his wife for Henry's situation. He emphasizes how she gives him books to read and treats him like a human. Sophie responds by reminding him that he does the same thing by playing racquetball with him. Later, as Henry is massaging Sophie, he strangely begins kissing her upper back and then her lips, but it turns out to be a nightmare as she suddenly wakes up beside her husband. In the afternoon, Sophie deliberately opens her bedroom door and begins pleasuring herself by thinking about the earlier dream. After finishing, she discovers Henry outside her room and wonders if he is watching her. He responds by asking if it would make her happy if he had been watching. Days later, when James notices Sophie and Henry laughing together near the pool, he becomes jealous. He returns to Julian and expresses concern that the robot is making advances on his wife, which may ruin their marriage. Julian explains that Henry is not programmed to love, but only to keep his owners satisfied. He suggests that the real issue lies between James and his wife, and they need to address it themselves. When James returns home, he instructs Henry to stop flirting and reading books with his wife. The robot agrees, but says that both his owners must agree unanimously. Upon hearing this, James becomes enraged and orders him to return to his docking station. He then confronts Sophie and tells her to stop reading with Henry, but this only angers her, and they start arguing like children. In the end, she decides to leave the house and stay at their old apartment for a few days. One day, James is in the bathroom when he notices his razor is missing. He summons Henry and instructs him to bring a new razor. Soon after, the robot enters the room naked, which surprises James. He asks what he's doing, and Henry responds that he is just fulfilling his desires. He then begins shaving James' beard, only to kiss him moments later. The latter is initially hesitant, but he soon kisses him back, and the two end up getting intimate. The next morning, James awakens alone in his bed, unsure if what happened was real. He notices that Henry has prepared breakfast, but is hesitant to discuss the events of the previous night. Later, at the office, he calls Sophie to try to mend their relationship and proposes they go on vacation together. But she doesn't seem very enthusiastic and suggests they discuss it in person instead. Sometime later, Sophie returns home and asks Henry to give her a massage. He obliges and starts rubbing her body, but then suddenly kisses her. Shocked, she asks why he did this, to which Henry responds that he wants to please her. This freaks her out, so she orders him to go to his docking station immediately. When James returns home in the evening, an upset Sophie tells him everything that happened, but this only makes him angry, and he shouts that Henry did what she desired. He then accuses her of encouraging the robot's behavior and treating him as a human being. After their argument, he confronts Henry and demands to know why he kissed Sophie. The robot claims that she begged for it, which infuriates James even more. He punches him hard in the face and tells him to return to his docking station. Henry complies and lies down, but James angrily disconnects the charger and leaves. The next morning, the couple calls Julian as they want to return Henry to the company. James then leaves for work, while Sophie waits for the technicians to arrive. Shortly after, Henry approaches her and mentions that his charging station has been disconnected. He asks if they no longer need him, to which Sophie explains that her husband is upset because he kissed her. Henry then calls James a hypocrite, since they also got intimate in her absence. Upon hearing this, Sophie is devastated as she did not expect her husband to stoop this low. Julian arrives at the same time to see what the problem is, but Sophie asks him to handle the robot and quickly leaves. Inside the house, Henry looks in the mirror and examines his bruise. He wonders why it hurts so bad. Julian then approaches him and orders him to return to the docking station. However, Henry refuses to follow his commands and accuses him of being a liar. Elsewhere, Sophie enters James' office and confronts him about his cheating. He admits he was envious of Henry because he appeared flawless, and Sophie lit up whenever she was near him. James says that the robot took advantage of his vulnerability and played on him. Hearing this, Sophie's anger turns to guilt, and she realizes that her feelings for Henry are not genuine. The couple then reconciles and embraces each other lovingly, but their romantic moment is cut short when James notices multiple missed calls from Henry. Upon arriving home, the couple finds Henry wandering in the backyard, completely naked. He appears to be sad as he knows he has disappointed his owners. The couple informs him that he will be returned to the company to be repaired and find new owners. James then instructs him to to return to his charging station, but Henry requests permission to remain in the field until his battery runs out. Although hesitant, the couple agrees out of pity. In the next scene, they head to the tech company to find Julian, but the place is crowded with FBI agents. The female robot Jessica appears very upset and insists that she needs to return to her owner. However, a social worker informs her that she is a real person who has been brainwashed into believing she is a robot. Hearing this, James and Sophie are shocked as they realize that Henry is also a human. They then return home with 2 FBI agents to find him and Julian. While they are searching for him, Julian appears out of nowhere and shoots the FBI agents. He then reveals that he took Henry when he was 3 years old, after his mother abused and abandoned him. Julian loved him like his own child and made him a perfect human. However, he is now distraught because the couple is abandoning him, just as his mother did. Julian then proceeds to shoot the couple, but a naked Henry intervenes just in time. He beats the shit out of Julian with his gun, killing him. After this, Henry picks up a knife that is lying on the ground. He feels ashamed for letting them down and claims he doesn't have any purpose to live. The couple tries to stop him, saying they love him a lot, but it's too late. Henry commits harakiri by stabbing himself in the stomach. In his final moments, he says that he knew from the start that his feelings were real. He then apologizes for causing all this trouble and passes away. Sophie and James are devastated by his death, and they cry while holding each other. In the final scene, 5 years have passed, and we see the couple in a park with their son Henry. When the boy asks his parents how he got his name, Sophie tells him that he was named after someone very special. She says it's a long story, and he will have to wait until he's older to hear it. So watch more movies like this video and subscribe the channel. Good day.